Okay, good morning and welcome to the 25th meeting of the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee. Can I ask that everyone checks that they've got a mobile device, that they switch it off, because leaving it in silent does interfere with broadcasting. We have an apology from the convener, Murdo Fraser, and there's an apology from Douglas Duff from Falkirk Council. He is hoping to attend, but he has been delayed. We've got 3 items of business today, and I'm going to ask members if they would agree to having item 3 heard in private. Okay, thank you very much. I would like members to introduce themselves. That's including witnesses. If you just state your name and if it's a member, your constituency, and for the witnesses, if you could announce your name and who you're representing. We'll start with Marco.
Marco Biaggi, the SNP MSP for Edinburgh Central.
Excuse me. Karen Yeomans. I'm the Project Director for Economic Development at North Ayrshire Council.
Susan Love, Policy Manager for the Federation of Small Businesses in Scotland.
Right. George Stevenson, Chairman of Falkirk for Business.
Right.
David Torrance, MSP, Kirkcaldy constituency.
John Park, MSP for Mid Scotland and Fife.
Jake Brodie, SNP MSP for the South of Scotland.
Mike Mackenzie, SNP MSP for the Highlands and Islands region.
I'm Dennis Robertson. I'm the Deputy Convener, stepping in for Murdo Fraser this morning, and I'm the SNP member for Aberdeenshire West. I'm going to invite witnesses to perhaps give a brief introduction this morning before we go to questions. Wonder, Karen, would you like to maybe say, obviously you said who you are, but maybe an opening statement for this morning?
Okay, I haven't actually prepared an opening statement, but I could say a few words about the situation in North Ayrshire with regards to the Business Gateway, if that's acceptable. North Ayrshire Council is the lead authority on behalf of the 2 other Ayrshire councils, East Ayrshire and South Ayrshire, and we manage the contract on behalf of those 3 authorities. We have contracted out the Business Gateway service and have been recently going through the procurement process since the end of last year. We've recently concluded all of the negotiations with our preferred bidder, and the preferred bidder is due to commence operations next week on the 1st of October. As a consequence of the process, we have swapped processor from our previous provider to a new provider, so we're obviously having to manage a number of other issues as well as actually the termination of the contract and the start of a new one. For example, things like the TUPE arrangements of staff, new premises, those sort of issues. So it has been a quite complex process, but one we think we are now on a good footing to go forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. As members will be aware, the Federation of Small Businesses contributed quite heavily to the committee's inquiry on Business Gateway last year. We sit on the stakeholder group, the external stakeholder group for Business Gateway. As a membership organisation, we don't have any role in delivery of Business Gateway anywhere in the country. We're primarily interested in the services that are delivered to our members across the country.
Thank you. As Chairman of Falkirk for Business, I was asked to chair a company that was formed by Falkirk Council. I think it's one of the most innovative and successful projects that, in terms of public and private sector partnership, that we've seen. It's been highly regarded widely. We have involved the private sector very well indeed in terms of driving the Business Gateway and wider business support. And as I think you'll see from the evidence you've had, that I don't think it's any doubt that we have been one of the most successful business gateways. So as a business community, we are deeply puzzled, deeply saddened that a decision was taken to take the Business Gateway and all other economic support services that we've been delivering so well in-house, particularly as the Council had created such a brilliant organisation in the first place.
Thank you, George. I'm sure we'll come back to that during the questioning. I'll maybe start off with a fairly general question. Last year, in October, the committee made a recommendation about the consultation process with regard to the Business Gateway. Do you feel that the process had improved and you were more involved in the sort of consultation for procurement, etc.? Maybe start with you, Karen.
Excuse me, I have a cold this morning, so I'll try not to cough too much, but so excuse me. Yes, I've been in post 3 months now, so I'm a recent joiner to the council and leading the Business Gateway activities. So my comments are really via colleagues' experiences through ourselves and through our partner authorities. And I think that the conclusion that I've heard from people and have observed to me is that the process has improved and the consultation process have improved from previous times. And whilst I think there's always room for further improvement and some of the perhaps decision making and guidance could have perhaps been a little swifter in some instances, nevertheless the whole process was much improved.
Expand a little on what you feel the areas of improvement could be?
As I said, I think it's the relationship, some of the decision making. There were 1 or 2 items of clarification during the tender process, which colleagues felt that had there been a swifter response, then some of the issues that we then found could have been resolved a bit quicker. So it's just sort of guidance on certain specific areas where I think everyone was still feeling their way through what has been a very complex procedure, tender procedure, and through that process then as items arrived for clarification, then it would have been if there could have been some improvements in the dialogue and the communications, it may have helped the situation.
Any member wish to ask a supplementary before we move on?
Yeah, just, if I may, convener, I mean, I have several questions later, but just on that particular subject. One of the things that we asked for at the inquiry, and I know you weren't in place, Karen, was simplification of the tender process and involvement. Again, the caveat is that you've only been in post 3 months, so I understand. But as I say, one of the requirements was that the whole process be more focused and more simplified. And I'm very concerned that you say it was complex. In what way the process was complex and the dialogue could have been a lot easier? Can you just very briefly go through where you see the complexity in the process, just very quickly?
Yeah.
Where the actual points of complexity were?
I think the complexity ended up as I came into post and picked up issues. So I think the complexity that I observed but originated as a consequence of the process, if that makes sense. So, for example, we have more recently had some issues came to light with the procurement process and with the bids that we received, and we had to have fairly in-depth discussions and reviews of the documentation, reviews of the decisions that we'd arrived at. And having been part of that process in detail, which was which to remind members is not only ourselves but requires the coordination across the other 2 authorities as well, has meant that quite a lot of time was spent reviewing all the documentation, reviewing quite a lot of detail. And I think that was a consequence of having looked at the procurement framework and having looked at the marking schemes that we had to put in place. That's where the complexity lay. So it didn't look or feel very straightforward, having had a view of hindsight, if you like. And what we've had to deal with in more recent times, which have now been satisfactorily resolved, I think had the framework been somewhat simpler, the scoring mechanisms been somewhat simpler, then I think we might have got more easily through the process.
Susan, the Federation of Small Businesses was fairly critical, I think, of the process, the initial process. Do you feel that that has improved?
Yeah, we were very critical of how the early stages of the consultation with stakeholders in developing the new contracts. I suspect, looking back, that was partly due to different expectations, both from the stakeholder perspective and from those running Business Gateway. In as much as stakeholders used to being involved in kind of national government consultations, we had expected quite a high level of involvement in the development. Whereas those who'd been delivering Business Gateway perhaps weren't used to involving national stakeholders to that extent. So there were expectation issues, I think, on both sides. And then I think another complication of the process was this issue of legal aspects of a tender process, and the fact that a lot of the stakeholders have some involvement in delivery. And there did seem to be a whole range of difficulties around how you might have a discussion around what do we want, what works, what might it look like, without potentially getting into hot water for many of the stakeholders potentially bidding. That did seem to create quite a great deal of concern and difficulty, which didn't help the discussions and led to these feelings of stakeholders not feeling like we were getting as much information or being as involved as we might like to have been. And perhaps that's something in the future that we might like to think about how we improve that if we're to go through that. Sorry.
We'll probably go down this road later. Are you telling me that you were not involved at an early stage in the process?
As we had said last year.
So the rationale behind that is because Colin Borland's requirement was that service users, FSB being one, and BES being another, should be involved at an early stage in the process.
Yeah.
And Section 55 of our report last year said we were supportive of the approach expressed by both to be involved at an early stage in the process. Are you telling me you weren't?
At the point at which we were giving evidence to the inquiry last year, that was the point at which the process had started and we hadn't felt like we'd been involved. Subsequently, following the publication of the report, we were involved in a number of discussions with Business Gateway. I was just trying to explain that the issues that had led to some of the difficulties of why we hadn't felt involved up to that point. So we did get involved in a number of discussions after the committee's report.
Decisions?
Sorry?
What about involvement in decisions?
No, we don't have a role in decisions.
Okay,
we have a
thank you.
role in discussing what we would like to see.
Thank you, Susan. Can I welcome Douglas Duff? Douglas, would you like to say who you represent, and I don't know if you would have a brief opening statement that you'd like to share with the committee. My apologies to the clerking team. We are supported today by our clerking team, members of SPICE, and obviously from broadcasting. Douglas.
Thank you, Convener. Apologies for being late. Unfortunately, 2 of the trains from Glasgow were cancelled and the other one was late, so it meant that I delayed my getting it along this morning. My role is the Head of Economic Development and Environmental Services with the Council, and I've been involved with the arrangements for the development of the Business Gateway service in the Falkirk area. I've submitted a written statement that explains the Council's decision that was reached in order to build what it terms a growth and investment unit that will blend Business Gateway with other services. The written statement gives full details of the basis for that decision, the connection that it has with the development of Falkirk's economy, the intention to promote growth and investment in the area, and the intention to integrate Business Gateway with other council services. Clearly, that has taken some time to get through, and we are in the midst of that currently with a view to having the service up and running from the 1st of October next Monday. But we are certainly confident that that will be undertaken successfully and we'll be able to build from there. Thank you.
Basically to advise you, we started off by looking at a recommendation that came from the committee from October last year, and that was due to the consultation process with regard to tendering, etc., and they were looking for always some improvement with regard to that. Do you feel that that was the case? There's been an improvement?
I think time will tell. Basically, the new service commences on Monday. We anticipate that there will be that improvement. In any of the work that we've undertaken on this, what we're looking to do is build on what has been achieved in the past, and you'll see from some of the other papers we work and have worked very closely with Falkirk for Business. It has been a successful deliverer in the area. We're looking to sustain the quality of that delivery, but add to it, and we anticipate particularly the benefits of connecting with other council services, connecting with other economic initiatives that we are taking forward as offering significant potential.
Thank you, Convener. It's a question for Mr Duff, because I'm struggling to understand the rationale. I'm obviously, having read the written evidence, I'm still struggling a wee bit, in as much as Falkirk for Business you know, seem to have provided an exemplary service. And, you know, I just wonder, are you aware of any other business gateway service provided in-house by a local authority anywhere in Scotland that's achieved results that are comparable with the results that have been achieved by Falkirk for Business?
I think we recognise the quality of service that they have delivered. Actually, that service has been delivered hand in hand with the council. The council had given substantial support to Falkirk for Business, assisted in its formation, and therefore, you know, we saw this as very much an integral part of the strategy for business support in the Falkirk area. We are aware of the delivery of Business Gateway in other areas, and how that's been undertaken in-house by some councils. Quite whether it matches the performance that has been obtained recently, I don't know in detail. I think that the performance across the country clearly varies, but there are very good examples. And in fact, in the course of the exercise we did, we looked at some of the good practice that had been undertaken in West Lothian, which had previously been highlighted at this committee, and have learned from some of their practice in order to bring forward our proposals.
There's something else that strikes me as curious, because you say this is the service is due to, or the changeover is due to take place very shortly, and I understand that you've awarded or subcontracted this to a company called the Robertson Partnership, and it just strikes me that there's something quite unusual here. You know, can you about this process? I would normally imagine that if this were going to be conducted, you know, not in-house as you originally attended, but to be, you know, through another company, then there would be a tendering process there. Have you gone through that kind of tendering process?
What we've done is we've benchmarked this activity. We know from the work that Roberts are doing that they have demonstrated best value in a tender exercise that was conducted for Edinburgh and the Lothians. We recognise that to have been tested, and we'll use it for the purpose of putting in place the service for a very short-term period. We anticipate this to be for the first 3 months until we staff up the new team. Clearly, the arrangements for this have been subject to the TUPE transfer process. We've had to rely on understanding what staff would transfer across as part of that process, and to put in place contingencies if there weren't sufficient support available arising from that. That's what we've done. We know now who the staff are who will be transferring. That information only came through to us a week past Thursday, so clearly we've had to act on a contingency basis, and therefore the Roberts appointment, as I say, has been benchmarked, but is short-term and will enable us to have the service up and running from next week.
So what you're suggesting is that the contract that you've entered into with the Robertson Partnership is only for 3 months?
Yes.
And aren't you concerned then about the kind of disruption? Because it would seem to me that, you know, with all due respect, it would seem to me that this kind of arrangement seems to be overly complex. Why? What, on the face of it, it would seem to me that the sensible thing to do under these circumstances would be to ask Falkirk for Business to assist you for the 3-month period until you were able to take it in-house. Why did you not follow that course?
Part of the intention here is to design and develop a new service. That's our intent. We're having regard to the requirement to deliver the Business Gateway. We are maintaining the national standard, but we want to add to it, as I've said, and we have got additional activities that we previously have commissioned and will want to add to as we bring forward the new service. As I say, the arrangement with the Roberts Partnership is a time-limited one, but it will give us the opportunity to learn from different practice that they offer and allow us to develop our own, and it's for that purpose that we've put them in place.
And before I bring in Chick Roddy, Mike, can I just bring George? George, would you like to make a comment?
Yes. Immediately after the decision on the 20th of June, I sat down and wrote a paper about how do we go forward from here, and I laid out some suggestions as how we could work together. I indicated at that time that it was a distinct possibility that Falkirk for Business would continue as an organisation, because one of the key aspects in all this was having an independent, private-led organisation working closely with the council, as set up by Douglas so successfully. And the business community were determined not to lose that. So I offered ways we could work with the council, including filling in gaps. I never got any feedback from that offer. I wrote again a week ago, once we knew that there would be very few people transferring, and again offered that we would be delighted to discuss how we could help them fill the gaps in the short term. I now discover that not only did they not ask us to quote, which would have been a simple matter, we would have been, in a spirit of goodwill, we would have more than likely looked at things like just doing something at cost with a small thing on top, just to help out in the short term. Because it's extremely important when you're doing this work with local companies that you have local knowledge. It is extremely helpful. So we could have done that. STEP and Ceteris, who are the partners of Falkirk Council, they are the lead council, and they work with STEP and Ceteris, were not even asked to quote. Both of them, Ceteris is primarily a training organisation and is highly regarded in that field, were not even asked to quote. A simple matter to prove best value, and that opportunity was not taken. So it's just another example, I'm afraid, of the council just not being prepared to work with the local business community, which is an extraordinary after they've done such a good job in the past of creating that, working with us to build these relationships.
Yes, forgive me. I mean, I have to say to Mr. Duff, based on my business experience, I would never take people on this type of contract for 3 months. So can you help me and tell me, when did Robertsons enter the frame? Were they one of the original tenderers, or have they just entered the frame? Can you also tell me what was referred to the board of Business Gateway Scotland for guidance in this circumstance, and what role they played, if any? And can you confirm that in your paper you said there's going to be £140,000 in financial savings? Again, my experience is if I hire somebody for 3 months, it's not going to be cheap. So can you confirm that you are going to save £140,000 in financial savings with the new scenario, and will you ensure that that is ring-fenced for Business Gateway purposes only?
The arrangement with Roberts has been introduced relatively recently.
How recent?
It's within the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The discussions leading up to it were related to our work with West Lothian. I mentioned earlier that we had sought to learn from the practice that they have in delivering the in-house service. We understood that they were a successful deliverer in the Lothians. As I say, they have been benchmarked for delivery of the new services from 1st of October. And
how have you managed to do that without skills, because you say you've got to train the people, in 2 weeks?
Sorry, without skills?
In terms of benchmarking them and getting them to do the job required for the next 3 months, with no skills, because the skills have transferred with, or by and large, with Falkirk for Business. So how are you going to deliver meaningfully, without upskilling Robertsons within days, to provide the service that you're contracted to provide?
Yes. Roberts are contracted to deliver workshops and events. They do that in the Edinburgh and Lothians currently, and that's what we're asking them to do for Falkirk. So it's an extension of the existing programme of activities that they deliver in that area.
Right. So who in Falkirk is going to provide small businesses with advice and business support and all the expertise that's required over the next 3 months?
In addition to Roberts, and it's not been touched on earlier, but in addition to Roberts, we will have additional business advisors appointed, again, for a short-term period, and that's something, again, that we have procured.
But you're still going to save 140,000?
The 140,000 we are quite confident that we will be able to obtain. The areas where we see that occurring from are in the revised arrangement for commissioning of the service across the Forth Valley, where an allocation was secured between Falkirk and the other parts of the Forth Valley for the delivery. It's around 50,000 there. And then there's an additional 90,000 that was identified as savings to be achieved from the delivery of the Business Gateway and our joint working agreement activity. And that can be in terms of reduced management costs, reduced administration costs,
Mr. Duff,
and marketing.
you're going to hire additional people. You're bringing on board a temporary resource, which, to cover the costs are going to be more expensive than normal, at least in my experience. How can you say you're going to save money? Tell me how you're going to provide the service that you're going to provide in that period of time.
Because the people who we will engage with for this short-term period are not additional to the existing service, they are part of it. Okay. So they are the ones, we will have to employ people to deliver that service, and for the period of the first 3 months of delivery, we're doing that on a short-term basis and temporary through Roberts and advisors.
Did you feel that you got best value from the previous provider in terms of what we see as an exemplary provision of service? Number 1 in Scotland, 4th in the UK. I mean, do you feel that you get best value, or is what you're proposing now to save money? Because my understanding in reading the papers is it's not just about the money aspect, it is about ensuring best value across the board.
Absolutely. Our fundamental intent in this has been to secure best value. And the approach in delivering best value previously was brought about through a joint arrangement between Falkirk for Business and the Council. That involved a significant support that the Council was granting to that organisation, and that is safeguarded through this next phase. So the 140,000 that we're identifying as efficiencies here will be redirected into business support activities. That's set out in the paper that we will have additional business grant scheme, a new business grant scheme introduced, and we will provide additional sectoral support for business. So the Council has made plain that it is not seeking to achieve cuts or savings from this exercise. It is looking to sustain its commitment and support for business, but redirect that to where it's needed.
Feel confident you've got good local knowledge to do that as well?
Absolutely. I think it makes plain in the paper that already the Council is extensively connected with business in the area. We are looking to build on that. We have 500 companies in our business properties. We have 2,000 food businesses who we visit day in and day out. We have 600 employers signed up and taken the pledge to offer places for young people. We have a very successful and well-connected service with business in the Falkirk area. That's what we're looking to build on.
Mackenzie?
Yeah, it's another question for Mr. Duff. My understanding is that that Falkirk Council employed consultants to review the service and to suggest improvements. Now, given that you employed consultants, that would seem to me to imply a kind of lack of understanding or expertise within Falkirk Council.
On the contrary, and actually it was our suggestion that this exercise be conducted by the Council in partnership with Falkirk for Business. Through the discussions we had with Falkirk for Business, it was suggested in their terms that we should involve an independent consultant, and that's why we then appointed them.
Forgive me, if you have a good understanding of this in-house, why on earth would you employ consultants to advise you of, you know, how to improve this service?
It was through our discussions with Falkirk for Business that they felt it was worthwhile doing it that way.
Right. So, but you not accept that, you know, you wouldn't if you know how to do something very well because you've got an in-depth knowledge of it yourself, it would seem pointless to go and, you know, employ consultants to tell you how you might do it better.
I would tend to agree with that. Through you, Chair, I would tend to agree that that does make sense, and we did feel that there was merit in adopting that approach. But I think for the purpose of giving assurance to the wider business community, to the people who are involved at Falkirk for Business, that it was suggested that an independent consultant would be used to support that, and that was the route we had adopted.
And don't you agree with me that it seems to be a very, very tall order indeed, that given that we've heard, you know, of the exemplary performance from Falkirk for Business, it's a very, very tall order indeed to suggest that in-house you're going to be able to provide a better service and make a very significant saving in percentage terms.
I accept the challenge that is there, but as a council, it's not looking to shirk that challenge. I think, given it's recognising the state of the economy worldwide, the state of the economy within Scotland, and Falkirk likes to think that it can punch its weight, that actually it has got more to contribute towards the nation's economy. We've been developing a tax increment finance project which anticipates £70 million of investment in infrastructure.
Yeah. With respect, I've read about that,
yeah.
and I'm not quite sure how that connects with, you know, the business gateway service. I appreciate that, you know, and I would commend you for that. But really, I think what we're concerned about, or certainly what I'm concerned about, is that we'll have a situation in which, first of all, and as you've just admitted, you don't really know enough about this to provide reassurance for stakeholders in-house, so you employ consultants to tell you what to do.
Sorry.
You then feel, if you just let me finish, you then feel that not only are you going to be able to provide a better service, but you're going to be able to do so at a significantly lesser cost. And then it transpires that you're not able to do it in-house and you have to go out and subcontract it to another organisation. You'll forgive me for coming to the conclusion that, you know, as I think any reasonable person would, that perhaps you've made a bit of a mess of this.
Through you, Convener, I would contend the opposite, that we had made the suggestion that we conduct the review ourselves. We do believe we had the skills to do that, and I think that could have been conducted quite readily. I think when it comes to setting up the service, the arrangements we have are for the short term. I'm confident that we will have a service that will hit the ground running on Monday. Our arrangement with Roberts gives us that reassurance. I'm content also that we'll have business advisors who have experience of delivering the service, and we'll have them in place from Monday. And I think what has to be recognised is the additional benefits that we suggested in the paper. We've set it out in terms of the integration that this service gives with those other services of the Council. It matches the overall ambition that was set out, we believe, by the Cabinet Secretary when the announcement to transfer the Business Gateway to the local authorities was made. In terms of the structure and how Business Gateway will sit with other parts of the service, that's set out in page 4 of the papers, where you'll see the main functions of the unit are set out. We have a team dealing with economic initiatives. We have the team dealing with business growth, including the Business Gateway, but with additional activities to deliver. And also we have an investment team who will be delivering the TIF. So we see this as an integrated growth and investment team It's bigger than the Business Gateway, but we feel respects the potential that Falkirk's economy has.
Ian, John Park, please. John.
Convener, I think Mr Duff said a little bit about the structure around the wider economic support that would be there. Can you say a little bit about the accountability? Because this is the thing that strikes me in all of this. Where does Business Gateway sit within the wider accountability and the measures that Falkirk Council have around economic development? Can you just, for the benefit of the committee, explain how it sits and what that accountability looks like?
The accountability for the Business Gateway will be through the performance of measurement of the Business Gateway service. So we will have to feed in reports to the national unit to demonstrate that the targets are being met, and we'll play part of the national network to make sure that we're learning from good practice across the country and are ensuring that the quality of service is maintained. That will be reported regularly to the Council. So regularly at committee meetings, we will be reporting on the performance of the service. Not solely the Business Gateway, we'll be pointing to the performance of the other parts of the team. And in our terms, we see that as a collective whole, that this is an opportunity to join up what has been achieved through the Business Gateway with some of those other services. Also, in terms of the wider accountability to the Falkirk business community, I make mention of the Falkirk Business Panel, which we are sustaining through this exercise. The Falkirk Business Panel is a very simple tool, a means of connecting with business in the Falkirk area, an entitlement to any business in the area to learn about what's going on in the economy. And we will be reporting through the panel in terms of how the Business Gateway is performing.
It slightly. I'm going to invite John.
Just one very quick question.
Okay.
Sorry, John
maybe hasn't finished.
John, you're still...
Yeah, I had a couple of questions to ask here, so sorry, Convener. Mr Stevenson, you explained quite clearly your frustration with the process and the outcome of the process. Why do you think it happened?
Well, you raised the issue that we had asked or suggested to the Council that there should be some independent review. We suggested this because we felt that the Council, having already declared a very firm interest in taking this service in-house, that they would be in an impossible position to be able to arrive at a decision and be seen to be independent. So in January, we suggested that they should use ECOS, who had a lot of experience in doing this work, and we were confident that they would have a very structured approach to a review. They would have a clear methodology that we would all share in and understand and accept, and then go into it equally together and share the results at the end and allow that to go forward as something that we were comfortable with as being a balanced view. Our suggestion was rejected at that point, and it was only in April that suddenly a consultant that we were not involved in, weren't consulted about who it was going to be, came in. They had no methodology, no structure. We weren't involved in any way in drawing up the terms of reference of the consultation process. And I think if anyone has seen the report, for example, we talked about savings. The savings, this 140,000, appears everywhere in the consultant's report, the Council's own report. We had put forward information to show that we were saving, we could deliver savings in excess of 200,000. That appeared nowhere. So it is quite absolutely fundamentally clear, if Falkirk Council had had to go into a tender process in order to win the Gateway contract, they would have come absolutely nowhere. They have none of the evidence to support a tender to make sure of best value. And the report that was produced by the consultant is just a travesty in our view, and is deeply upsetting to see a process being manipulated in that way.
Just in terms of that process that you went through, what next for Falkirk for Business? What are you doing going forward? You still exist as an organisation, obviously?
Yes, I mean, the paper that I prepared for the benefit of the council was based on the fact that if you're going to work with the business community, we have to work out how we're going to work together. And in terms of the core business gateway processes, there's some very, very clearly laid out processes of delivering some of the core aspects of business gateway. And that is really driven by demand, so that people will come to wherever the business gateway is seeking help and advice on startup. So I have no difficulty that that core service could be delivered within a council framework. I don't have huge problems with that. Where there's a huge need is in working with the wider business community, growing businesses that have got through the startup phase and are having to start to employ people. They encounter all sorts of barriers where an involvement and a much wider support is going to, where you really are going to get added value. And you're going to help companies avoid going out of business because you're giving them the support from other business people. So that's through mentoring, through working with them, the sorts of things, all the other things that we were doing within Business Gateway, some of it funded wisely by the council in terms of a joint working agreement. So we had all these elements in place. There is still that need. I said, well, fine, you deliver the core business services and work with us, and we will do what we do well, which is using our network, using the power of the private sector. I have got some fantastic people on the board of Falkirk for Business who will all work, give their time freely to support the business network.
Is that still going to happen going forward?
No, because it's been made absolutely clear now by the council that they will not involve us in any delivery of service.
Yeah, I understand. But what are Falkirk for Business is still there as an entity? What is it going to be doing?
Well, we're going to continue. We're going to expand the services we provide for local businesses through delivery of a Chamber of Commerce.
And those services will complement what the council are doing, not be in
we do not
competition
want We do not want Falkirk Council to fail in this. For heaven's sake, we want them to succeed, and we want to work with them. We've accepted the decisions being made. We are deeply, deeply upset at the process that we went through. However, we're business people. We accept that that's the decision, and all we are interested in now is trying to make the best of what we've got. However, we do not seem to be welcomed to participate.
Should you be selling business services, basically? Is that how you're
well,
going to set yourselves up to fund that going forward?
Yes, it would be a membership organisation. So you're moving into it where we were seeking funding from the private sector. The great value of what Douglas had set up was, apart from enabling the governance, because governance is key, making it private sector led, encouraging the people to come in because they feel they can make a difference. So they're not bogged down in political issues. So get on with the job, deliver it well. So it will be a membership, whereas with the funding from the council, everyone was involved. So it was a very, very efficient way of getting business support and services to everybody.
But going forward, you're going to work in partnership.
We will do our best. We're going to have to start again. I mean, in my view, we've gone back 5 years in where we got to. I'm going to have to build. We have to work out how we're going to do that.
Right, thank you. Can I bring in Susan Love? Susan, do you have any comment with what you've heard this morning so far with reference to the Federation of Small Business?
I mean, one of the strengths of the system that we had highlighted previously was that a lot of the enterprise trusts and other bodies who were delivering the service, what they brought to the process was a lot of experience of working in the local area for a long time and knowledge of local businesses, and that's really invaluable. So I think it's disappointing if we're going to lose some of that in a process of taking it in-house. It's not to say that delivering it in-house is necessarily bad or worse than it being done by someone else, but you will potentially lose that experience that some of the enterprise trusts and other bodies brought to the table if the staff don't transfer over to the council. So, and I think having been aware of a lot of the good stuff that was happening in Falkirk, it's just quite disappointing to hear how things seem to have turned out.
Can I ask Chip Brody?
Yeah, I'd like to move on.
Yes,
with one just last comment, and I use this phrase, regrettably, but something stinks. I mean, going forward, this is not good for the business community as I see it. Despite your best will, Mr Stevenson, you will end up in competition. There is no question that the relationship is clearly broken down. You will end up in competition. That's not good for the Falkirk business or the Scottish business community. And can I suggest that, you know, perhaps an early meeting as to how your roles and responsibilities, how you're going to work together, might be appropriate. Can I move on now to Karen? And I say this from someone who lives in here. Can you, in the past contract, the circumstances were that South Ayrshire and East Ayrshire, I believe, contributed to North Ayrshire, who then contracted with the Go Group in Glasgow. We were looking for something slightly different to make sure that councils, local authorities were held directly responsible for the outcomes and targets, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Can you tell me how you're going to work this scenario, how it's going to be different? Because although there was goodwill on part of the Business Gateway people on the ground, I didn't find that system particularly effective because the Go Group are based in Glasgow and we're doing a lot of work in Glasgow, and their presence in South Ayrshire, for example, wasn't particularly high. How are you going to achieve this? And will the contributions by South Ayrshire and North Ayrshire and East Ayrshire, and yourselves, of course, be ring-fenced so that there is appropriate allocation to these areas?
So if I start off with that latter point first, our funding comes through and it's ring-fenced for Business Gateway, so we receive the total amount of money, and that's then we then contract with a new provider from next week. So all of that funding is there, it's ring-fenced, and it's there to work on behalf of the three authorities on an equal basis. Obviously, we've just gone through a procurement process, and we are changing provider as a consequence of that. And we've looked carefully at how that provider's going to work going forwards. And I think it's a combination, in my view, and this is perhaps where a fresh pair of eyes, if you like, on the scene. I think we will need to make sure that the three councils work together very collaboratively. Each of the authorities have some in-house service, not a gateway service, but some business support services that we offer. That varies slightly across the authorities. We need to work together to make sure that that is the most effective, but also we clearly need to work with the new provider going forwards, who is Lanarkshire Enterprises, from 1st of October. So in my mind, we have coordination across the three authorities. That needs to be in place, and that needs to continue to improve as we look to deliver the service, and we clearly need to work closely with Lanarkshire Enterprise to make sure that they are producing the most effective service possible for all three authorities.
And you think that each local authority will get the effort from Lanarkshire Enterprises in proportion to the contribution to the central pot, which you manage?
Yes, we manage that central pot, and it's shared. The contribution is shared equally across the three authorities. Absolutely, and it's our job to make sure that Lanarkshire Enterprise do the job that they need to do, and we'll be looking at that very robustly.
Can I go beyond that then?
Yes,
if I may?
of course.
And I want to come back to the Board of Governance, the Board of Business Gateway's governance and involvement in all this, because that's going to be relevant to the next session. Who sets the outcomes and the targets for each, in particularly the Lanarkshire Enterprises case? Who sets the targets and outcomes for each of the individual council areas in, and it's not just Ayrshire, this happens elsewhere. As I say, who sets that? Who monitors it? And have we moved away from the measurement process that we talked of last year with a number of events and number of things and turnover to, most importantly, survival rates and birth rates?
We have the responsibility for monitoring, and my background from the West Midlands is one where monitoring and evaluation is a very important component to make sure that if you've got an external service, or indeed an internally delivered service, they are delivering, and there will be regular monitoring of that contract to make sure that they're doing that, both in a way to make sure they're delivering it, but obviously working in a collaborative way to make sure that any improvements need to be addressed and that all three authorities are achieving what we needed to deliver. The three economies, three local authority area economies in Ayrshire, whilst they have some commonality, there are also differences, and the Business Gateway service. And that's where I think one of the benefits we've had since the previous contract period, that we have had more local flexibility to determine what actually are the precise requirements for each local authority area. And there are nuances that we've wanted to achieve, and we have been able to achieve. In terms of the framework of actually what are we monitoring and what have we set down for Lanarkshire enterprises to achieve, I think there's still areas there where, certainly from a local perspective, we haven't quite got the framework, the outcome reporting framework quite right. So, for example, in North Ayrshire, job creation, job safeguarding, and the longevity of those jobs being surviving beyond 12 months is a really important issue for us. We just simply haven't got enough jobs in the North Ayrshire economy. Yet we're not measuring that specifically through the framework, the National Framework Agreement, and we're having to put in place some local ability to do that. But I do find it quite...
Sorry to interrupt. Are you telling the committee, and by the way, I applaud you for, and I imagine how you're feeling with that. It's been a very heavy cold, so well done for being here. Are you telling me that what guidance has been given by the national body in terms of consistency, so that we, with not too much experience, can look at meaningful measures? I mean, have the board of Business Gateway Scotland given quite clear guidance in terms of the framework of the contracts across the nation? There's a consistency that we will know what the relative and relevant performances are. And by the way, and do these include sustainability, environment issues, various other things like that? Are these targets set?
There is a consistency, and I think that's to be welcomed, so that comparative judgments can be made. My point is that at the local level, there are some key measures that still haven't been put in place nationally, is my understanding, and that we are going to have to pick those up locally. And the job creation, the job safeguarding, and looking at the job longevity post 12 months are simply not there. So a key measure for the local authority in terms of just simply how many jobs are we creating has not been there from the national perspective. Some of the new firm formation have been, survivability issues have been, turnover, things like events, the latter of which I think for me are simply an input measure, but actually for us in the local economy, it's the numbers of jobs that we're creating is a really important measure, and one that we've had to sort of go back and particularly target. And to particularly target Lanarkshire Enterprise to make sure that they're producing the data so that we can focus and understand those. So it is a negotiation, and I think we have had the local flexibility that enables us to do that. But I just find it sort of slightly surprising that a key measure like job creation doesn't appear to have made its way into the national framework, is my understanding. And I say that because as I've come into post, and we're looking very specifically at what the needs of the economy are, what's the role of the local authority, what programmes have we got in place, how do we complement the many other organisations who are involved in economic development in Ayrshire and North Ayrshire, then we need to have a basket of measures that enables us to do that. And job creation, as I said, is the fundamental objective of our strategy, our economic strategy. And so I need to make sure that I'm clear when I'm reporting to members and wider audiences that we understand precisely what we're doing, and we're making sure that as we whether or not we're achieving them, or whether or not our programmes need to develop and change to meet circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I understand, and hopefully that would be
presentation to the board with those specific issues.
I'm too new in post to have done that, but if I get the opportunity, then I would be making those points, because they are important ones to me, but I've not had that opportunity yet.
I think, thank you for your frankness, and it does raise some questions, convener, for the next session, because there was supposed to be consistency. Can I just move on to Susan, if I may, just one last question? When we were talking earlier about your involvement in discussions but not in decisions. I mean, do you feel third parties like important ones like FSB, like social enterprise, and by the way, there's, again, we need to find out if members of the FSB and social enterprise are actually now on the board of Business Gateway Scotland, as was requested. Do you feel that you've been involved in decision making and in setting the targets and falling in line with what we believe to be the National Economic Strategy, which Scottish Enterprise have driven? Have you been involved in decisions, not just discussions?
No. The stakeholder group has no role in decision making around Business Gateway. We put forward concerns, we discuss issues, but all of those decisions are taken by the board, and we're not represented on the board.
And you're not represented on the board?
No.
So and there was no request from the board to have someone from you on the board?
No.
Thank you.
Convener, can I? Yes. Just on that point as well, to Susan, I think Chuck Brodie's raised a relevant point there about how you might influence wider policy, and obviously the FSB are an organisation who are engaged with the government at a range of different levels. What would be the perfect scenario for an organisation like yourselves in terms of trying to influence not just wider economic development policy, but actually the sort of decisions that are taken around Business Gateway? Do you have a preferred option? Do you have a policy position?
I mean, I think in the past we've indicated that we would like to be more involved, and certainly if Business Gateway had considered opening up their board to stakeholders, that would certainly have given us an opportunity to get in about some of the operational discussions which we're not involved with at the moment. I think there's a desire to kind of keep the policy of how Business Gateway operates, keep that a little bit separate from the stakeholders. Also, as I outlined in our submission, the moves to set up a closer working between local and national government on economic development, again, that's just delivery side. There isn't an opportunity for us to get involved in that. And I think that's a shame, because we're in a position of noticing different services that are being delivered around the country, seeing good practice or bad practice, what works, what doesn't work. And at the moment, we don't have an opportunity to really raise that beyond using the Business Gateway stakeholder group as a forum or an opportunity to pass on comments or raise concerns.
Other members are indicated to go on the count. Is there any, Mike? Did you want? No. Karen, you mentioned earlier on, just in your earlier introduction, some of the difficulties with regard to obviously changing the contracts with two-pay agreements. Is it a barrier? Because we're dealing with people, obviously, and people transferring from one job to another have grave concerns.
Yes. And coming in sort of fairly late into the process, and having dealt with a number of contracts where 2P issues have applied, I was very concerned to make sure that the service passed from one provider to another as effectively and efficiently as possible. And I was particularly concerned about the people issues, because ultimately it's the people who are providing the service, and they need to be motivated and resourced and trained and developed. I think in Ayrshire we are in a position where the new provider is welcomed by staff, and people are moving in a constructive way to the new provider. And I think seeing the new provider providing things like training opportunities for future employment enhancement, like looking at the sort of different opportunities that people might want to grow and develop their own careers. A small number have, I believe, may take a redundancy package, but for the most part, in what can be quite a tricky time and uncertain time for people as they move from one to another, I think it's a hallmark of the provider that we've got coming in, and we've been monitoring it closely and making sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. But people look as though they're moving across smoothly. Obviously, the next few months will tell as to whether that has been really achieved. But so far, from quite a nervousness on my part when I saw what we were doing, that actually the people side is progressing probably better than I would have hoped, if I'm honest. But that doesn't mean to say that it's easy. I think it's around careful planning and ensuring that the dialogue is there, the communication is there, and that's been thought through and managed by us.
Do you think there's an extension to that transition because the new contract starts on the 1st of October?
No, they start next week.
Just when you said a few months.
I'm talking from months that have gone by to this point now.
Okay, check.
Just one last short question. One of the recommendations of the committee was to embrace and integrate business support activities across other council services. Now, we have very important bills coming down the line in terms of community empowerment bill, the procurement bill, and there's the town regeneration activity. And again, I ask across the panel, what thought has been given, do you believe, in the setting of the contracts to allow you the flexibility to engage with third sector social enterprises to address with other council services the generation of more involvement of Business Gateway and the social enterprises with these other services and the provision of the services that will be required, particularly via the procurement bill?
Perspective, social enterprise is a very important feature of our offer, and we want to improve, or we want to enhance the way we work with social enterprises, and we have a number a number of programmes and initiatives ongoing, and probably will do more. So I think it's an important part of what we want to do, an important part of what we are doing. I see nothing in the Business Gateway service, or indeed our own offerings, that would preclude that. So I think it's, for us, it's about looking at the challenges of the economy, looking how we can best work with our other Ayrshire colleagues, looking with the providers we've got, so Business Gateway in this particular case, and making sure that we respond and meet those challenges. And so I see nothing that will prevent us from doing that, other than some hard work and some perhaps innovation on our side.
Can I just say that in our view, there is no a requirement to have Business Gateway embedded in the council in order to improve relationships with other areas of delivery within the council. And we have, it took 10 years to build up the relationships to the level where we could achieve that. It's hard work, but it can be done. And independently, the International Future Forum looked at the work we had done to build up the relationships between the senior levels of the council and business. And they said, in their view, this was the most outstanding example of a private-public partnership that they had ever come across. And it was wonderful. It was one of the highlights of my business career, which is rapidly coming to the lowest point right now, sadly. But it can be done. But don't think for a minute that it's easy. I mean, you do have to work at these relationships. But if the relationships are there, it is easy to make sure you have connections to all the workings in the council. But it's based on relationships. You can't just make it happen.
Yes.
Absolutely. Sorry, convener.
Now, basically what I was going to ask, first of all, before I ask you to come in, Douglas, is any other member got any questions for the members of the panel? I'm briefly just going to ask you, the witnesses, if you wish to have any closing statements, certainly we'd like to hear them. So maybe start with you, Douglas.
I think basically to come back to the last question, that our whole design of the new growth and investment service respects the agenda that we perceive to be coming through the Parliament. It builds on the intent set out initially by the Cabinet Secretary in empowering local government to take this challenge on. We believe that we can do that successfully. We've got a good track record in delivery in other parts of our service that support business, and we're confident that we can do it through this exercise. when it comes to support for social enterprises and other parts of the business community, whether that be in retailing or in tourism. These are areas where we have got quite extensive connections and will be looking to build through the connection of the Business Gateway with other parts of what this team delivers. So we're very confident that we can respond to the measures which we do see coming through the Parliament. I think particularly the Better Regulation Bill, which is being consulted on currently, is a very tangible example of that, and one that we will hope to build on. So we are confident. We expect that we will get through this immediate period to get this service established. And when it comes to next year, we're hopeful that we will have quite major initiatives. Particularly, I mentioned TIF because I think for Falkirk that is the key new project that we're aiming to bring forward. We want to see our support to business come in behind that, and we're confident that that can be achieved.
Thank you. I think the key for me is that it requires a very proactive relationship between the partner authorities in our case and our gateway provider, so Lanarkshire Enterprise, and I see that we've got the spirit of that coming forward, so that the process has got us to this point where I look forward from next month onwards to that very proactive relationship. And if that bears out how I hope, then I think we will have in place a better service for the businesses of Ayrshire. I do think, though, as I said earlier, we need to keep a very firm eye on what actually is being provided and make sure that it is being targeted to the requirements of the 3 Ayrshire councils. And that's where we're having to put in more work to ensure that that happens in terms of the framework and the monitoring of that. But the key for me is that very proactive relationship that you have. You just sort of can't assume that it will happen. You have to manage it and manage it really, really proactively.
Thank you. I think, just to kind of recap where we are from an FSB point of view, I think the process of getting here has left a lot to be desired. We've made a number of points about what we would like to see in the new contracts, particularly around how we support existing businesses who might not be hitting growth criteria, and I hope that's going to be reflected in the new services. We have seen some encouraging signs from a number of local authorities so far who seem to be taking on board the message about using Business Gateway to better integrate a range of services across the council that businesses would use. But it's too early to tell how well those are going to work out or whether those good ideas are going to come to fruition. And so we look forward to seeing what the individual local contracts are going to look like, what the services look like. And there is just this wider question of how we make sure that we share best practice on local economic development, because Business Gateway is only a small part of that.
George, do you want to?
Thank you. If I could just say, in terms of the larger scale economic strategies, Falkirk have been exemplary and they are very good at it. Unfortunately, what they seem to have a blind spot about is the elements of the way things are structured in terms of governance, the engagement of the private sector, the accountability they take on, and the delivery through their networks. And it just is one example on that, having a banker, one of the leading solicitors on the board, accountants. These people are working with all these businesses. They are their clients. They're working with them day in, day out. There is a natural network of engagement, and it works extremely well. And the risk, there's been this huge risk of assuming that that can be carried into the public sector. And we know that from other experiences of trying to work within advisory groups in the council, that without decision-making and accountability, these people are busy, busy people. They get frustrated, they lose interest, and it becomes a talking shop. And you lose the engagement of the private sector, which has been the powerhouse behind the success story. And if all I would say is I would be delighted to come and share all that we have learnt through this process as an outstanding example of best practice. I would hate this to be lost. I mean, we may have lost the opportunity to deliver it in Falkirk, but I would hate Scotland to have lost the opportunity to gather that knowledge and hopefully use it in the future.
Thank you very much. Can I, on behalf of the committee, thank the witnesses for their time this morning and providing us with the opportunity to give you the questions, and for your frankness. I'm going to suspend the meeting in order that we can change witnesses. Thank you. Okay, right, we can proceed. Welcome the new witnesses for this morning's meeting. Can I just remind everybody, members of the public and members that maybe just joined us, to ensure that they've switched off their mobiles. And can I welcome Hugh Lightbody and Jim Galloway. Maybe, gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourself and say which organisation you represent and give a short statement?
Hi, Jim Galloway here. I'll go first. My role is as a member of the Business Gateway National Board and as Vice Chair of SLADE, which is the Scottish Local Authority Economic Development Group. I should explain that the Chair of SLADE, Alec Anderson, is recovering from serious health issues and can't be here today. And the Chair of Business Gateway is returning from China. So I'm representing him today as well. My day job is the Head of Enterprise and Innovation in the City of Edinburgh Council.
I'm Hugh Lightbody. I'm the Chief Officer for the Business Gateway National Unit based in the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities. And Jim's going to do the opening statement for us both.
So I'll just proceed with that. Thank you. Thank you, Convener. In 2007, Mr Swinney transferred the Business Gateway to local authorities. And I think he had two main aims in that. One, that it would align closer to those other business-facing services provided by councils and with the general economic development activities of councils, but also that decision-making process should be at a local level. And that it might respond better to local needs and be flexible in changing economic circumstances. Now, this took place in 2008, and I can't tell you how rapidly changing the economic circumstances were at that time. But just prior to the transfer from Scottish Enterprise, they had completed a process of recontracting. So therefore, the local authorities in 12 areas, 12 delivery areas, inherited contracts that were to run for 4.5 years. So to an extent, those arrangements that had been put in place placed limits on how much we could change the programme. But the evaluation in 2010 and the inquiry by this committee in 2011 found in general that there had been some advantages gained in the transfer to local authorities, and we had received some positive feedback from the business community at that time. Since then, we've introduced further flexibility in consultation with the business community, including the new sub-growth pipeline to look at modest growth in small businesses. Now, of course, the current contracts end at the end of this week, and the 2012 recontracting process has given us a further opportunity to consider at a local level how best to provide those continuing services. The Business Gateway Board, along with SLADE and COSLA, and in consultation, I must say, with the business community, devised a nationally agreed service specification, which the aim of which is to ensure the integrity of the core project of Business Gateway and its brand remains strong as a national programme. And it's important to note, I think, that it's this service specification which has led and informed the recontracting processes across each area. Regardless of the chosen delivery mechanism, the national specification ensures that Business Gateway moving forward remains a national programme, but allows for local flexibility. I think, as the Cabinet Secretary, Mr Swinney, intended, local authorities have had the opportunity to decide how and by whom the service is to be delivered. Some have contracted out the whole service, some have contracted in part, and others have brought the service fully in-house. For the majority of the cases, I believe that the recontracting process has gone smoothly. We've heard this morning from one that perhaps hasn't. But in all cases, I'm assured that the process has complied with local authority rules and regulations on best value and transparent procurement processes and procedures. I think COSLA, Slade and the Business Gateway Board have kept a watchful eye on the process without intervening in local decision-making processes. The Business Gateway Network is working together well to ensure that the transition is as smooth as possible and that a service will be available across the country on the 1st of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Perhaps to kick off, can I maybe just come back to the consultation process? Do you think that the consultation process was as broad and as encompassing as it should have been?
I think it was as broad and as encompassing as it should have been. Yes, I think after the committee input the last time, we did broaden the range of consultation, and there was a due process that we were going through, which meant that for some of the people that we wished to consult with had an interest in the contracts. So whilst we were putting together the broad service specification, it was important that we maintained the confidential nature of that process. And then once we had agreed nationally through the board and through the stakeholders group, we were then able to consult further. But there is a process where you have to decide what you want first before you then speak to those partners who would have an interest in delivering that service.
I think as well as part of that process, one of the things that we did in November was what's called a prior information notice, where essentially we took the kind of the early thoughts that we had in terms of what the service specification would be, and we invited through a procurement process through the OJU Europe an opportunity for anyone and everyone who had an interest in that to come along and make input to the process. That was held on the 18th of November. As Jim says, we've had discussions with other partners and stakeholders between September and when we've actually finally developed the specification. And I think the other thing that's important to reflect on, and it was again a piece of work that the committee looked at even further back, which was the gap in business support services. And there was a piece of work pulled together last year, consultation with a wide variety of partners, including Federation of Small Businesses, Chamber of Commerce and so on the issue of the gap in business support services. And what's interesting about that particular piece of work was it didn't find a gap. So we are reasonably comfortable that through the evaluation, through the consultation work we've done, and through the work around the gap exercise that took place at the tail end of last year, that the Business Gateway service, in conjunction with all the other support services that are there, is fit for purpose and will do what we want it to do.
Yes, I would add that the specification wasn't put together in isolation. It was informed by the evaluation, which was independently carried out by a duly appointed consultant. Stakeholders were consulted broadly on that evaluation and gave very honest feedback. That shaped our specification, which we then went to consult with. I think the committee meeting that resulted in some recommendations came at the sort of midpoint in that process, where we were completing the evaluation and putting together the specification.
You obviously be aware that the Scottish Government are taking forward a procurement bill currently, and the basis for that will provide hopefully opportunities in improved procurement process, the opportunity to put greater emphasis on community benefit, things like that. What would you see as changes that could be made here in the Scottish Parliament or by the Scottish Government that would improve the procurement process from your perspective, but also from the organisations who have been engaged in it?
I think there's a lot already been done on the kind of procurement issue, and I think broad thrust of procurement bill would be welcome. We've had through local government the supplier development programme, for example, to try and encourage small businesses to access opportunities in public sector contracts. Personally speaking, within Stirling Council, we ran a European, when I was with Stirling Council, we ran a European programme which was about assisting construction companies to try and win more business in public sector contracts. And really that was about improving their skills, improving their ability to win the business, to have the confidence in going through the tender processes. One of the aspects of that, I think, perhaps, that and maybe it's a bit of a promotional thing perhaps the Parliament can be doing. One of the issues for very small businesses is the ability to win those bigger contracts because of their size, and maybe there's an opportunity to do more through Cooperative Development Scotland, for example, in collaboration and working more cooperatively together. This is the year of cooperation. It would be good to see more support, more messages of how those small businesses could work together to win that kind of public sector contracts.
Can I ask more specifically about the Business Gateway process as well? Because obviously the Business Gateway procurement process that you've been through has been based on current legislation that we have here in the Scottish Parliament, and the limitations of that perhaps in some ways. Are there improvements that could be made in terms of that process, do you think? Legislative changes that could be made that would make that process better, provide better opportunities for the organisations that want to deliver the services through Business Gateway?
I think it's insightful of the Parliament and the members to recognise that a review of the Procurement Act is required. I'm not a procurement expert. I have a team who advise me on procurement processes, and although they work hard to make the process as painless as possible, any simplification of the process would be very helpful. I think as local authority buyers, if you like, our hands are often tied by the regulations, and we would love to be able to provide more opportunities to small businesses, to local businesses. If you just go into UJEC, you automatically have to open the field Europe-wide. But I think within simplifying it, it's essential that we maintain the transparency and the fair and honest process through that. But as I say, I'm not an expert on procurement, but anything that makes it simpler for me as an officer to make decisions and make those decisions quickly. In the case of Business Gateway, it is a huge national programme. It's there's an element of local decision making to go through. There's the board and the elected members' role in driving the policy and the strategy for that, responding to the Parliament's wishes for the programme and hopes and aims for it. I think because of those things, we started off this process as the earliest possible juncture, sending out information from the board and from the national unit out to local authorities as early as last November, in order to get the process in place, because we know as officers how long it can take. So it's taken 9 months to go through this process, because it is a cumbersome process. I wouldn't necessarily say it's complex, but it can be cumbersome and it can take a long time.
Yeah. I think it's also worth adding that in terms of the Business Gateway procurement process, the scale of the contracts is such that they have to be notified at European level. So to a degree, I'm not sure what more can be done within the Scottish context when we're faced with EU legislation that we have to comply with first and foremost. And as I say, the scale of the contracts was such that we had to go through Europe on that.
Obviously the Scottish Government feel that there can be improvements, and that's why we've got the bill there and how we weight things and aggregation and stuff like that, which might not be completely relevant to the process you've been through, but will certainly be relevant to the companies who want to engage in procurement going forward. I suppose the other thing I want to ask, and I presume you heard some of the evidence in the previous session, and without making the process more cumbersome, there's obviously quite a bit of expectation management to be done in terms of organisations who haven't been successful. Do you see any route for some sort of remedy in that process for people to challenge that could any improvements in that way, or you know, is it just that's just the nature of the game? You just have to get on with it and get your head down.
I think key to this is the decision on who delivers the service and the model for the service is one that should be taken at a local level. What we've done as a board and as a national unit is provided guidance through this national specification, and I have to say we have kept a watchful eye on the process, and where necessary we've provided further advice and support. And the situation in Falkirk is as it is, and officers and staff in the neighbouring areas in West Lothian and my own area, Edinburgh and Lothians, are helping out with support to make sure. I mean, I think the role for the Business Gateway Board and for the national unit is to ensure that as far as possible the process is smooth, so the local authorities have all the information they need in order to make the decision, and where necessary we ensure that the national programme will be delivered, and we've helped Falkirk in that regard very recently.
Thank
you, Convener. Yeah, we heard last year when the committee were, undertaking a fuller inquiry into this, that there were real concerns about the patchiness of the service offered. That in some areas, we heard this morning from Falkirk for Business about the exemplary service that they provided in their area, but other areas, the feeling was that the service provided had not been as good, or had scope for improvement. Have you taken any steps to address that patchiness of service and made any progress in that respect?
I don't think that we recognised a patchiness in service. We recognised that there were differences in performance across Scotland, principally due to different economic circumstances in different areas. I think what I would point to is that every month, I think, as I said at the committee last time round, we do a quality assurance, a piece of quality assurance work. We consult with customers of the service, we survey them, we find out what they thought of the service, and the customer satisfaction rate consistently is running at 86%. We're comfortable with the service that's being delivered.
I think the new service specification, which each of the 32 local authorities have signed up to, and also the COSLA leaders group representing all 32 leaders of all the councils, they've accepted that specification. The new governance structure that will be in place with effect from next week provides for a national group of managers who will oversee and make sure that there is consistency. It's Hugh's role as the head of the national unit to ensure that when stats on performance and outcomes and outputs come through, they're fed into the management group.
Sorry, Jim. I mean, I don't understand why we need. I mean, one of the objectives of the committee last time was to reduce the structure. Frankly, I don't know why we have a national unit or a business gateway board when the thing was supposed to be decentralised to local authorities. Now you're telling me we've got another group of managers who are watching the process, and we've got a national unit over here that's looking at performance. Why can't the managers do that? Why do we need the national unit?
Well, if I could explain, as we did the last time around, the function of the national unit is to provide national marketing for the Business Gateway service. Business Gateway is a brand. It's a national brand. It is a service provided, delivered locally, but it is a national brand. It requires, therefore, national marketing, and the function of the national unit is to provide that marketing. It's also to do the performance reporting and the quality assurance. That happens at a national level because it's a national programme. That's what we do. when we're talking about there about the governance, essentially what we're responding to is a couple of things that have happened in the last 9 or 10 months or so. And I think Susan touched on it earlier on. We have to recognise that Business Gateway is just one element of business support within Scotland. One of the developments that's taking place that we've got agreement from through the government and through COSLA is the creation of a partnership board, a forum, which brings together all the local economic development agencies, Scottish Enterprise, Highlands Islands Enterprise, Skills Development Scotland, local authorities, so on. And the function of that is in order to have that debate, that discussion about these wider economic development issues. Recognising that what we are doing within the Business Gateway context is we're changing the structure of the board, because if Scottish Enterprise and High and so on are represented at that level, and as they are represented already on the external stakeholders, what we're doing is taking an opportunity to change the board into what we've described as a management group, which simply has representation from senior managers from the local authorities delivering the service. And that gives us that opportunity for a consistency and ensuring that that quality of service is taking place.
Convener, can I just go back to, get back onto the original track? I appreciate the helpful question from Chick Brodie. This issue of patchiness, and you've partially, you've got me onto the track that I was intending to take you down anyway, and that is about national performance. It's about local performance and target setting. So, can you just explain to me about how the targets for each particular area are set?
Well, that was touched on earlier on. The question was asked, I don't know that it was necessarily answered. Target setting happens at the local level. That's what the local authorities there, as the lead local authorities, are there to do, to set the targets for their area.
Yeah, now, and that takes me on to a concern I have, and you'll note if you read the committee's previous report, that the committee had a concern that in the Highlands and Islands region, that the targets set there in particular were perhaps set at a too low a level. When you look at GDP per capita for the Highlands and Islands region now, the historical situation has changed completely. From being historically lower GDP per capita to now higher GDP per capita, perhaps because of the opportunities of renewable energy and so on, and that those new opportunities that have been provided. And in that context, it seems that the targets for that region are very, very low. And given that, there seems to be something unfortunate then that can, where we get a situation where that is the result, and it would seem to me that there needs to be some kind of national oversight of target setting to make sure that these targets are properly aspirational. Otherwise, it's really just not doing the job that it's designed for. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think this actually answers perhaps Mr. Brodie's question as well, which is why we need this national coming together of the managers who are responsible for Business Gateway, like myself, the service manager who has budget and management responsibility for delivery of Business Gateway in Edinburgh and the Lothians. The new grouping brings together those managers so that we can discuss and agree targets that are relevant to the local economy, but are also, we agree that they're aspirational. They're then collated to provide the national targets for Business Gateway. We would then provide that in a report to both our councillors locally and the councillors in COSLA, so that there's political oversight and political agreement to those targets. And if the councillors, either at local or in the COSLA grouping, feel that the targets are insufficient or too low, then be assured they'll let us know, and we have to respond to that and go back and review the targets. So this identifies why the local programme feeds up into the national managers group. Now that's not another layer of governance. This is just the managers coming together to agree. Yeah, and make sure that it remains part of a national programme.
Yeah, what you've described, and I mean, I go back to Mr. Lightbody's referenced the customer satisfaction survey, and the committee previously had concerns with the methodology that had been applied there. And it now seems to me that what you're describing about the target setting process is pretty subjective and anecdotal, rather than being arrived at through some kind of rigorous methodology, that seeks to impose some kind of rationalism on target setting, rather than, just a kind of anecdotal process.
Perhaps I'm not explaining fully enough. The specification, the national specification, which was based on the evaluation and included feedback from this committee and from stakeholders, puts in the process by which the local authorities are guided to set their targets. Now, they have to do that in full knowledge of the performance of the area and the aspirations and the economic strategy for that area.
Could I ask if you perhaps it's not the place to go into that in detail. Could you maybe provide the committee with written evidence that details the methodology that's used for target setting? Because I think it's very, very important that these targets are properly set. Obviously, they have to be realistic, but they should be aspirational as well. We can't improve things unless we set, targets that are, at least slightly challenging.
Yeah, well, delighted to do that for you, and we'll make sure that you get that information. But the check for us is that the politicians, either at a local council level through the committee process, or through Hugh's national unit reporting into the COSLA group, which is all the leaders, they provide us with the check and balance on whether they feel the targets are realistic and stretching. But provide full information about the methodology.
Yeah, if I can just, finally just say that it seems to me, and it certainly was there was a consensus in the committee, a year or so ago when we previously looked at this, that there was a degree in which this business gateway operated on the basis of, if I could describe the analogy, that if I set myself the target today to do nothing, and by 8 o'clock was able to announce that I was already close to achieving the target, and that the customer satisfaction survey that I answered suggested that I was entirely happy with the whole thing. And so there's a self-referencing aspect to this that seems to be one in which everybody gets a great report card and everything's wonderful. And the committee feeling was, having taken evidence quite extensively a year ago, that everything wasn't wonderful. And I'm just concerned that there doesn't appear to have been all that much progress in addressing those concerns. And the answer to that would seem to be a robust methodology in terms of, target setting, and then an analysis of performance, which would obviously include a degree of a customer satisfaction survey. Would you agree with that?
I don't think I would agree with that at all. I mean, at the end of the day, Business Gateway, one of the principal services that we're there to provide is a start-up service. And over the last 2 years, we have achieved levels of performance in assisting start-ups above the targets that we've set. We've achieved a better performance than the target.
Yeah, but the whole point I'm trying to make to you, sir, is that perhaps the targets are set far too low. And certainly in the area that I represent, and therefore know well, it seems, there are a number of sources have suggested to me that the targets have been set far too low.
Yeah.
So
I think you made the point. Right. Good morning. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think, the service was handed over to local authorities to decide. Now that means our elected members are the check and balance for us, and the elected members are getting petitioned by businesses and all sorts of people from the community, and they're very quick to tell us if we set targets that are too low, and if we try to pull wool over anybody's eyes about performance, they're very quick to certainly in Edinburgh, very quick to notice that, and we just don't get away with it. And I think that process through local decision making, through the management group who decide and agree that and report to the elected members, gives us that process.
I just, before we, I'm sure Mr Mackenzie sets himself aspirational targets and they're never as low as he suggested. Chick Brody.
Good morning. Mr Lightbody, you've just said that you believe the performance of Business Gateway has been good in terms of startups. And as much as I may respect your opinion, I respect much more the opinion of Sir Tom Hunter, who sat at the Business and Parliament conference and said we've failed manifestly to create enough startups. We create 36 per 100,000 members of the population, which frankly is appalling. Right? So it comes back to the issue that my colleague has just addressed in terms of not just startups and, more importantly, survival rates. I'd like to ask, have you now gone away from the sort of spurious measures that you had before about the number of events held, etc.? Can you tell me the hard, concrete, job-related targets that are being set? Who's setting them? How are they being monitored? And what are the consequences and penalties of not achieving the targets?
I make the point that Business Gateway is a universal service, and it's there for every business, any size, any sector, anywhere. It would be impossible for us to set a target for the number of jobs created because we will not know until we are working with them who the businesses are that we are going to be working with, what the projects that they are going to undertake, what their achievements are going to be. And those achievements may not be about job creation. Those achievements may be about a new product development or getting into a new market. So it's very difficult for us to say, sitting here now, that we could set a target for X amount of jobs.
But you just lauded yourself for achieving targets that you have set.
Indeed.
So you can't have it both ways.
I think the local targets are tied in with local economic strategies. For example, and I can speak confidently for Edinburgh here. They've just launched a new strategy for jobs, which has a number of key targets of is it 5,000? Off the top of I would have to refer to my notes, but we have a defined figure of jobs to be created per year over the next 5 years. Business Gateway is contributing to that. That's informing the Business Gateway targets. We've had past performance of over 2,200 businesses formed in the Edinburgh and Lothian regions over the last couple of years. So we put a stretch on that and we apply that to the next year. So those targets setting is based on local knowledge of the economy, the local strategy by the elected members and in consultation with the business community. And that's fed up through the managers group and then approved by politicians at national level in COSLA. That's how we do it. The monitoring of that is provided through Hughes Unit. Each local authority delivery area provides monthly statistics on performance. And we as a management group review that performance. We look to improve, we'll be looking to improve where we're not hitting targets, and look at best practice where we're exceeding targets. And we'll be reporting regularly to our local councillors and through COSLA at a national level.
Right, you've talked about national strategy. There's a bigger strategy than that, which is the national one set by Scottish Enterprise. But you've talked about a strategy, and yet Mr Lightbody just said we don't know where the stuff's coming from. It's a universal service, it's provided any time, anywhere, and therefore it's difficult to set targets, although he did say that he'd passed the targets that had been set previously. Let me come to the issue of governance. I mean, last year, Mr Lightbody, you answered a question from my colleague Patrick Harvey about social enterprises and said they weren't as accessible. I chair the cross-party group on social enterprise, and we discussed what they need in terms of business support and the relationship, if any, with Business Gateway. Nobody actually cheered that notion. Last night, I attended a very good meeting with Scottish Enterprise, but again, the issue was there's not enough feed-through of businesses. We heard from Falkirk today, and then we also heard today, last year, the Federation of Small Businesses said that
there wasn't enough engagement with bodies like theirs, and we heard today from their representative, who was very, and it's a good organisation, that the process leaves a lot to be desired. What is Business Gateway? If Business Gateway is a brand, and a brand should have a story to tell, what story does Business Gateway nationally have to tell? How do you tell a story which is, when you go down to the local level, is diffused because some local authorities can have the thing in-house, and I don't know how you monitor their finance or whether their finances are ring-fenced in the current situation, and then you have the private sector. What on earth, please help clarify in my mind what Business Gateway is doing to market the brand, sell the brand proactively, not wait for people to come in, because to me there is no evidence, and I still am not convinced that we need this, a hegemony of organisation from the top. I just do not. Well, can you tell me, please, what the level of governance is? Who are you talking to, and how involved are they in the decisions?
There's a lot in there. The Business Gateway national brand and identity is marketed through Hughes national unit, which sits within COSLA. They have a marketing campaign, there are poster campaigns, there's press advertising campaigns, there's radio campaigns on a frequent basis. That's reviewed and monitored by the previous board, and will be continued to be reviewed and monitored by the management group and governed by the elected members. There is a stakeholder group which the management group links to, which includes the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, Federation of Small Businesses and other stakeholders such as that. Scottish Enterprise and Scottish Government come along to the management group as well, so that we're linked in with the strategy. Please be assured that the officers on this management group are senior managers like myself, who are linked into the networks through Slade and through other Scottish Government groupings. We're very aware of the collaboration agenda, and we're key players in that collaboration agenda, so that Business Gateway does not operate in isolation. It's part of the Scottish Government's economic strategy. It's funded by the Scottish Government, so we answer to the Scottish Government through the political process. The governance structure has been simplified to this management group, who can make the decisions and do make the decisions and hold budget.
This is quite important,
yep.
As far as I'm concerned. We have local authority development managers, Slate and Slate, right, of which represents all of the local authority. You're one as vice chair of Slate. Why do we need the rest? Why can't this body of Slate, who are much more directly involved, drive consistency across the local authorities, because you're in touch with other local authority services, you're a representative of local authority. Why does it need anything else other than the Slade organisation to drive this business startup activity? Or business survival activity?
I think Business Gateway is a very important programme. It's got a fairly large budget given by the Scottish Government, and we have a responsibility to make sure that Business Gateway programme is delivered as intended by the Scottish Government. So we need to be able to meet to discuss Business Gateway.
Why does it have to exist at all if there already is an organisation that can achieve consistency across Scotland?
Are you asking whether Business Gateway should exist, or
no,
whether the
Business Gateway, or whatever you want to call it in terms of assisting small businesses, must exist? It's critical.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm questioning how we delayer the activity in management terms, and how do we ensure that the process moves faster. And I think we've already got an organisation in terms of Slate. I'm being deliberately provocative because I really want to see, I don't want to know about their budget or what have you. I want to know where's the body that will make the decisions.
Slade, hang on a second. I've written up, and it's been accepted by the executive of Slade, a strategic development plan for Slade, which is very broad, a full remit and gambit of economic development, including inward investment, regeneration agenda, employability and skills, and business support. It's a you know, across the piece, there we'd estimated that there was some £25 million spent by local authorities on economic development. It's practically across the board, from Scottish Government through local government. Economic development remains a top priority, both at national and local level. So that there's a huge job for Slade to do. This is why we've assembled a new far-reaching strategic development plan, and we are consulting with our colleagues in Solace and with the Scottish Government on how we take that forward. Business Gateway is a very important part of that, and we're seeking to make sure that it's integrated with that, that it doesn't work in isolation, that it's integrated not just at a local level alongside planning and trading standards like it's going to be in Edinburgh, but at a national level alongside inward investment and regeneration. But we still, I still believe that we need. I still believe that we need that management group to make sure that 17 to 21 million that's provided for business gateways is spent and governed correctly and forms part of that wider
saying that under
programme.
the current regime, notwithstanding, and I agree with you about Slade and all the things it does, and I clearly has to be related to the business gateway activity. In fact, it should be part of it. Are you telling me you're concerned that the 21 million, when it's devolved and delegated to local authorities, that in the case where it's directly managed by local authorities, it may not be ring-fenced, that the money allocated to the business gateway locally is not secure?
No, I'm not concerned at all. The COSLA leadership group agreed, and has been agreed across the 32 local authorities, that the business gateway money provided for business gateway will be spent on business gateway. So I'm not concerned about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Patrick, you've been very patient. Can I bring Patrick Carby in, please?
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, gentlemen. I just wanted to explore this issue about consistency and local variability a little bit further. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that, given the local economic circumstances that we've identified are different in different parts of the country, local strategic approaches and priorities are different in different parts of the country, that we would benefit from an experimental approach, a willingness to try new things, to try new approaches, rather than assuming that we already know how everything is going to work. And the idea of local variation in the delivery model, it strikes me, could be consistent with that, could result in a range of different successes and failures to learn from. How does that relate to this issue you're talking about of national consistency? Where is there a danger that if we're too focused on consistency, we lose the experimental approach and the ability to create successes and failures and learn from them?
I think one of the key messages that came out from the evaluation we did in the first half of last year was that need for a local flexibility. And it was something that was echoed here within the committee last year, that there was this desire for local flexibility. The balance we've had to strike there, though, is that this is a national programme. There needs to be a consistent delivery across Scotland. So to do that in developing the service specification, what we have within that is a core service, which is start-up advisory services and growth advisory services, and provision for local services. And that's the flexible element of the delivery. And that, therefore, is available to each local area to put in place programmes that suit their local circumstances, their local needs, or indeed the local opportunities, which might be about supporting women into business, it might be about supporting young people, whatever is important to their particular area. So the evaluation and what the committee were saying last year are both embraced within that specification, which gives us that balance of the consistent approach across Scotland and the ability to deliver local services, local flexibility.
I think I'd maybe just add to that is one thing to remember about Business Gateway, it's not all about us, it's about the customer, it's about the business customer. And I think one of the key things about the national programme is that the business customer doesn't really care who's delivering it, they just want to see a service. And for business people, they want to be able to pick up an 0845 number that they see in the national press and get through to a service. And I think it's important we don't lose sight of that business customer need. So it's important that we have a national programme, a national identity and a route into that. And then we can provide them with the wider services that are kind of secondary in their mind.
See that business customers, as you put it, being happy with the service is important, but in terms of the public good and taxpayers' value for money, there's probably a range of other things that are important as well. It just strikes me that the area where there's a need for consistency and where this committee, as the body that holds the government to account, should be focused on consistency, is the consistency between different aspects of government policy that impact on small businesses. Business support services through the Gateway, planning, procurement and the ability of small businesses to bid for public sector contracts, as well as the regulation changes that will be coming up shortly, and for example how we use business rates, what government policy is on business rates, and the small business bonus, which we've heard some suggestions are untargeted and don't achieve economic impact. Is that not the area where we should be looking for consistency? What is Business Gateway trying to achieve, and what are all the other government policies that impact on businesses and small businesses trying to achieve?
Yes, I think so. And Business Gateway advisors are on the ground are actually really quite well versed in many of the regulatory issues and the challenges that face businesses as they're trying to set up and grow. I think the move to bring Business Gateway more in line with local authority services will help enormously, and certainly I'll give another plug for Edinburgh at Waverley Court. On Monday, Business Gateway are joining the team. They're going to be sitting right alongside planning and building standards, licence and trading standards and environmental services, so that relationship grows better. The understanding that the advisors have about how the services works better. And key to this is that the business customer comes to a one-door approach, goes to one counter, and all these services are available to them at that level. Now, that's going to make it easier to do business in Edinburgh. I've seen across other areas similar situations, whether it's a contractor or whether it's a council that's brought it in-house. There's an alignment of those services, and that can only make things easier for businesses. I think as this Parliament goes forward and the bills that you're intending to produce reduce regulation and make procurement simpler and so forth, I think that will help again.
There was me believing the Minister when he said better regulation rather than reduced regulation, but we'll see, won't we? Did Mr Lightbody want to add something there?
I was going to say that, just to add to that, one of the indicators within the new service specification is, in fact, number of customers referred to other local services, such as planning, environmental health and so on, and to other partners or other organisations providing a service. That's one of the indicators, whether it's an in-house service or a contractor delivering it. That's one of the expectations in terms of what we want to look at, that integration. How is that being achieved? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Is enough being done with regard to the social or community benefit in terms of the support that you offer? We can probably focus on maybe social enterprise groups, for instance.
I think in terms of certainly social enterprises, we as I've said before, the service is open to any business, but we have a specific service for social enterprises which the government's created called Just Enterprise. And its role is very much about building the capacity of social enterprises to the point where they're able to access, if they're not originally able to access Business Gateway services because of a capability or a capacity issue. So Just Enterprise, Business Gateway working very closely together on that, significant number of referrals going back and forward between the organisations.
Just Enterprise are a member of the board now, aren't they?
No, the committee last year, in the committee itself suggested that Social Enterprise Scotland should become a member of the stakeholders group, and that we did. Because of the changes that were taking place in the governance and a desire that that's essentially local government in what we've now got in the management group, it wasn't appropriate to bring Just Enterprise in. However, Business Gateway does sit on Just Enterprise's steering group, so there is a connection there through that.
Slade have ensured that there's a good connection between local economic development services and Just Enterprise and the social enterprise network, if you like. So there's continuing work through the Slade development plan to make sure that the social enterprise programme is supported.
We also heard from Susan Love earlier about the role of the Federation of Small Businesses. They feel they probably should have a greater role and engagement. Would you like to comment on that?
Obviously, Federation of Small Businesses is on the external stakeholders group, as Susan mentioned earlier, and that really is a conduit through which FSB and organisations like that have an opportunity to make input into the process. I think we probably need to get a wee bit smarter about how we make sure that input takes place and make sure we engage fully with our stakeholders.
If I can just give you, again, in Edinburgh, and I think this is echoed around many of the regions. In Edinburgh, we have a very good relationship with the FSB. The East of Scotland group have agreed to be surveyed on a quarterly basis by my team to determine the shape and content of the local flexible programme of workshops. So they'll be consulted directly, not just as a grouping, but as the individual members, to make sure that what we are providing locally meets local needs.
Dick Brody?
Yeah. Call me cynical if you like. I don't see any change from last year at all. Could you tell me what changes there are? There's no change in the Board of Governance. You say there's a closer relationship. You said that last year with social enterprises, with Just Enterprise. What's changed? Where has there been a fundamental change, as was requested by this committee at the end of last year?
The committee, I would suggest, made recommendations rather than requests. We've looked at those recommendations. We've considered them in the light of the evaluation that was done at the first half of last year. And the evaluation was very, very clear in terms of the delivery of the service. There was limited appetite for wholesale change. The message that we got was keep doing what you were doing, but we wanted to see more local flexibility.
With due respect, Mr Lightbody, I'll take you back to the Eccleston report, for which you paid, not you paid, but the body paid £60,000 for a report which said the governance of this organisation left a lot to be desired. Nothing has changed. Why not?
The government structure that we illustrated last time we were here had 7 different bodies on it. There are 2 governance groupings. There's the management group that reports to the political process, either at a local or a national level. That's the governance structure. To the right-hand side of that, if you like, is our stakeholder group, which is informing the managers, those that are providing for Business Gateway, on what the needs are at a national and a local level. So it's
but despite the fact
reduced to 2 from 7.
Local authorities, and this was the purpose of the change, were to be responsible for the management, the day-to-day management of Business Gateway. We still have a Business Gateway Scotland Board, a Business Gateway National Unit, a Business Gateway Operational Network. We've got a Business Gateway Contractors Forum. We've got Business Gateway External Stakeholders Group membership. We still have a Scottish Local. We have a Scottish Local Authorities Economic Development Slade Group. Nothing has changed. Why not?
Well, in terms of the governance, as we've said, there's...
The answer is you decided to ignore the committee's recommendations. I don't know. But you haven't changed anything in terms of the roles and responsibilities of bodies in the system. It's overmanaged, there are too many layers, and we're still not clear who sets the outcomes and the targets and how we're going to improve Scotland's business startup and survival rate mechanism, in my opinion.
I would just repeat, the governance structure for Business Gateway sits with the local authority. The decision on targets, on how it's delivered and who delivers it sits with the local authorities. The managers of those local authorities come together in a grouping to make sure that we're all aligned, that we can look at the national picture, if you like. And that management group reports to senior politicians in COSLA and at their local levels. That's the governance structure. 2 layers, managers and politicians. We have to consult. We have to consult wide, with stakeholders. So there's a stakeholders group. It's not part of the governance structure. It's a stakeholders reference group, and that steers our decision making. And I think that's.
It would appear to me, and forgive me if I may be wrong, that it looks as if not only has the committee's recommendations been not cast aside, but not taken much on board, and your own EcosGen report, which I said cost nice tidy sum of £60,000 to produce, has not been paid particularly much attention to either. That's my opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's my opinion.
Does any other member have a question for witnesses?
Thank you. Just a very small question following on from a question that Chuck Brody asked in the last session. Obviously, there's been changes in terms of how we deliver service, and that's had an impact on staff. So you have staff who are moving in and moving out, perhaps in the case of Falkirk, for example. Do you essentially provide guidance on that? Have there been any staffing issues as such? And do you have any concerns about how that might be managed going forward?
I think the process, local decision making process, has been governed by the regulations that the councils work to, including transfer of undertakings and continuing employment duty and so forth. So there are already guidance and procedures in place. We as a board and my colleague here has kept a watchful eye on proceedings to make sure that everything has gone as smoothly as possible.
It might be useful. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question. It's something that occurred to me when you were giving me your answer there. There are provisions within the Local Government Act of 2003, I think, protect two-tier workforce in terms of people who are transferred from the public sector, local government into the private sector or out with local government. Is that something that's applied in the transfer?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Thank you, Convener. It's a question for Mr Galloway. I was delighted to hear the progress that's been made in Edinburgh in terms of making the general council services more business friendly. It seems to me that's one of the great merits of local authorities having the involvement in Business Gateway. But in a position to say how far that same effect is spread throughout other local authorities in Scotland?
It's early days yet. The new service starts on Monday. Through my Slade networks and through discussions with other managers, we seem to be heading in generally in the same direction. And the purpose of Mr Swinney's review in 2007, I think, has been achieved. Business Gateway has transferred to local authorities, and it is more integrated with those other services. I certainly have a drive and ambition to make it easier to do business in Edinburgh. That's my function in my day job, and I'm pleased to get good feedback about that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm delighted that's recognised. I just wonder if there's, and I appreciate it's difficult, but is there any way of measuring that? And is there any way of knowing if that success of Edinburgh, which is terrific, and I've certainly heard feedback that you are making a difference in Edinburgh, but is there any way of knowing, beyond just the anecdotal, whether or not that same effect is spreading across the other local authorities in Scotland?
Well, interestingly, we had a presentation last week from somebody from the FDI, and they have a set of matrices that they use to measure business friendliness. I'm going to use that in Edinburgh, and I'll be encouraging my fellow managers to do the same so that we can report that.
Well, that sounds very interesting, and thanks very much for that answer.
If there's no further questions from members, I can invite the witnesses to make a concluding statement if you wish.
What I'd like to say is, as I've just said, the purpose of the review of business gateways was to put it in the hands of the local authorities so that decision making can be made at a local level. I believe we're doing that. I believe we're doing that in a way that satisfies the intention of Mr Swinney in his review. But at the same time, we have to make sure that it's a national programme that the business customer can understand and access easily. So we have a process to make sure that the national programme, the brand and the core programme is protected and delivered.
I think I would echo Jim's comments on that. It is a national programme. It has been delivered and will continue to be delivered at a high standard. And that consistency that's been built into the service specification, together with that local flexibility that's also been built in, we hope as we take that forward will generate better returns for the Scottish economy.
Thank you. Can I thank you on behalf of the committee? And we are now moving into private session. Thank you.